Hello. Before we get started with the show, just a quick announcement. The tickets for our upcoming live event in November in London are now on sale. So you better want to get your ticket now, or maybe while listening to the show, and all you have to do is go to troubleterps.com/live. That's troubleterps.com/live. Get your ticket, support us, and please spread the word. And now, on with the show.
Are we speaking off the record here?
What's said on the outtakes stays on the outtakes. It's because that's the stuff that people actually listen to.
You guys can tell we're super professional.
I don't know. Easter Bunny?
That's my snack. Oh my god. I'm already establishing a really bad reputation. I haven't even said anything yet.
You should, you can, let me.
People who use fancy words, I hate people like that.
Right?
Oh, shut up now.
That'd be hilarious.
It's not a bit like with Dirty Dancing where you go, this is my dance space, that is your dance space, like my interpreting space, your interpreting space. Stay out of my space because I need my space.
Jonathan hates it when we say it, so we try to make it a point of saying it every single episode.
I say that all the time. That came out wrong, didn't it?
Troublesome Terps is like Las Vegas meets interpreting.
It's a Shark Tank.
Oh, you make it sound terrible. Hello and welcome to Troublesome Terps, the podcast about the things that keep interpreters up at night. This is the second installment in our two-part series on professional associations. And once again, we have not one, but two very special guests. First off, it's the chair of VKD, and this is not the Vereinigung der Köche in Deutschland, not the German Cooks Association. No, it's the German Association of Conference Interpreters, Karin Walker. She's been a member of the association since 2011 and a member of the executive board since 2015 and a chair since 2018, the chair actually. She's also been an active member of AIIC since 2007. Karin is a hybrid in the truest sense, British-born and raised, schooled in Germany, back and forth for some time, and now she's settled in Bonn with a neurotic cat and a serious love for a job, as she tells us. And speaking of job, Karin and I actually both work for the European institutions. Have we ever worked on the same assignment, Karin?
No, we have not. We've been sort of almost assigned to the same missions, but it never really happened, so... Maybe soon.
Maybe one day soon. I know that we have exchanged glossaries, and you've been very helpful with glossaries at
customs chemistry.
For customs chemistry, indeed.
Oh
where you needed all the help you could get.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. But let's not talk about that.
Moving on swiftly.
Yeah, moving on. Moving right along to our second guest. We have with us the head of the German Region of AIIC and fellow podcaster, actually, of Pommes Buddha fame, Sarah King. Sarah has also been a long-time member of VKD, as well as an AIIC member since 2016. And she was elected regional secretary of the German region during a fantastic regional meeting in Hamburg in 2017, I was told from a reliable source. She holds degrees from Cologne University, but also from the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. She started off her career as an in-house translator and interpreter at the German Federal Criminal Police Office, or BKA as we call it in Germany, and she's been a freelancer since then and now lives not in Bonn, but in Cologne, and she tells us she's an all-weather cyclist. So Sarah, how's the weather today in Cologne? Did you do any cycling?
The weather was fine today, but I just did some work today, so I wasn't actually outside.
Okay, well, that happens to the best of us, I guess. And funnily, as far as we could verify, I am apparently the only one who is not a member of both associations, whatever that means. I don't know. I used to be a member of VKD, but I'm not anymore. So there you go.
Well, I think Jonathan's also not a member, right?
I am completely the odd one out because I am not a member of AIIC.
That's true.
And I'm not a member of VKD.
That's fine. But I did want to introduce my two lovely co-hosts, of course. First of all, you already heard the dulcet tones from Scotland, Jonathan Downey.
It's lovely to be back. It's good to do another Troublesome Terp show and to talk about a subject that's so close to my heart and so close to lots of people's hearts. I'm really looking forward to see where we go with this.
So am I. And of course, let's not forget the second Alexander in this team, Alexander Gansmeyer from beautiful Munich. Hello, how are you, Alex?
Hi guys, I'm pretty good. I'm actually really excited to have so many chairs and boards on here. I feel like we're doing like a carpentry workshop.
He's getting his pun game on early in the show. That's great.
No one is allowed to beat me at puns. That's not allowed. I was also going to say that I think Sarah lives in Cologne, where I did a big chunk of my PhD in Bonn. Most of my field research was in Bonn, and so Bonn and Cologne is part of my favourite part of the whole world. So I'm a big fan of both. And I don't know why every German that I say I like Bonn gives me this look as if I've just confessed to some heinous crime. Bonn is lovely.
It is, yeah. I just thought we start things off, very simply, and we talk a little bit about what our two guests do in their respective associations. And I already introduced Sarah as being the regional secretary of the German region of AIIC. Sarah, maybe you can just quickly explain how that works in AIIC, because there are no national associations, but instead there are regions. But maybe you can just give us the gist and what that means for you, so what your job actually is in AIIC Germany.
Right, sure. So AIIC is a world association, so it's an international association, and we don't speak of countries, but we speak of regions. So we have several regions. Most regions consist of one country, but there are also some regions that consist of several countries. And each region has a regional bureau, which is kind of like a board. And the regional secretary is the head of the board, so to speak. So we have 3 board members, the treasurer and the AB, so advisory board member, and me, the regional secretary. And my tasks are varied. I handle relations with members. I contribute, of course, also to some issues that are of interest to conference interpreters, because we do some work with, like, on projects, or we just contribute something to those issues. Also issues of sign language interpreters, because we have sign language interpreters as members as well. We support research, because we closely cooperate with the universities. We sometimes get inquiries by students writing master's theses and so on. Then, of course, I have classic administrative tasks, answering email inquiries and so on. And as I said, also coordinating some of the things that our different departments do, PR, Young Interpreters Department, the Continued Professional Development Department, and so on.
Yeah. And not to get too deep into the weeds of German association law, but is the German AIIC region sort of independent in terms of how it's organized, or is it actually just part of AIIC?
It is just a part of AIIC, because we're not a legal entity in Germany, and that has pros and cons. But we don't need to get into the nitty gritty of Vereinsrecht or something like that. So that's a plot.
Yeah. And Karin, how would you say is that different to how the VKD is set up, or to the work that you do as head of the association?
Do you really want to talk about Vereinsrecht? I could do that forever.
Be my guest. I can always cut it out later.
No, but that's maybe one of the biggest differences between VKD and AIIC Germany, because we are an entity in our own right, which comes with, I guess, some advantages, but also some disadvantages, in that we have to take care of a great deal more paperwork, I guess. So there's a lot of administrative stuff that we have to do. Notably, whenever there's a change in the statutes, we have to go and get that registered with the courts. Whenever there's a change in the board, which can happen normally only every 3 years, but you just never know. So there's that. And also VKD is, maybe that's a similarity to AIIC. We are part of BDU, which is a Germany-wide association for translators and interpreters. But we are within that construct, we're a separate entity, which does not mean that we don't have to coordinate a lot with them. They provide, let's say, the framework within which we operate, administrative, technical, IT, which means that is the advantage of us being part of something bigger, because we would otherwise have to build a whole kind of IT background ourselves, which we don't have the resources to do. But it also means having to coordinate, I'd say probably about 60% of the moves that we make. And that can take quite a lot of time. It's a little bit frustrating, because we are the only association within BDU that takes care exclusively of conference interpreting. And very often we're seen as the kind of exotic people who consider themselves to be a little bit different, which we are, but there we go. So maybe another difference between VKD and AIIC is that we don't really have, because we're not global, the same kind of visibility. We don't have the same kind of political clout. We don't have the same history. We're only about 15 to 20 years old. And so when it comes to sort of lobbying work, that is maybe not something we can do quite as well, because people don't really, let's say not people, the wider public doesn't really take us seriously yet because we don't have that visibility. But on the other hand, we do get a lot of grassroots work done. So we have a wide range of issues at the grassroots level, at the level where people actually do interpreting, that we can take care of. And that's probably what keeps us busy most of the time.
And since you mentioned lobbying, but I think that's one of the areas where you can rely on sort of the clout that the BDU has as the umbrella organization of all the, well, it's Germany after all, so it has to be federalized, of course. So there's all these sort of member organizations. But then, of course, the BDU on a federal level can actually lobby, and I think they have been lobbying as well, increasingly to lawmakers or big associations. So can you maybe just briefly describe some of that? Did you know? I mean, were you involved in that?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't personally involved, but I've been monitoring what's been going on, because at the meetings that we have to attend, if we're a member of the BDU, you get told about these things. So, for instance, they've been lobbying for more qualified interpreters for the more exotic languages, because when all the refugees came to Germany in 2015, there was a massive need for interpreting then, community interpreting in that case, and there simply weren't any people on hand who were suitably qualified to interpret for the refugees, who obviously had to speak to the authorities to get their asylum claims checked and so on. So for a very long time, there was this massive vacuum where people were just flooding in, pretending to speak German, pretending to be neutral, and very often not really doing a very good job at all. And the media were basically jumping on that and blaming the interpreters, blaming the authorities for not doing their job and not verifying that people were doing a good job. So there was this big vacuum, and I know that BDU has made a lot of effort recently to A, show the government that it is really important to work with qualified people, B, to fund the training that is necessary, obviously, to get people who have these languages, because there's not that many of them, to go out and get proper training. And they've also been providing training on behalf of the, now you've caught me out because I don't know the English name of the BAMF, the Bundesamt für Migration und Flüchtlinge, so basically the authorities that take care of migrants and refugees. So that's one thing they've been doing. They've also been lobbying heavily to try to find a better way to get old age pension arrangements for freelancers. That is a massive thing that the government initially wasn't very creative in handling. They wanted to force everyone into the statutory system, which for freelancers simply does not work, because for a very long time they haven't been paying into the statutory pension funds. They weren't going to recognize whether people had other assets, for instance, and BDU has been instrumental in showing the government that there's more ways to get to where they want to go, and to allow for some sort of flexibility for freelancers. So that's something that benefits the whole community of freelancers, here specifically people who work with language. This is not something that we have the time or the resources to get into, but BDU has a big, big following in Germany, and they are recognized by the people in power as a force to be reckoned with. And we have to be grateful to them, it has to be said.
That's
I mean,
great, yeah.
that gives me a slight side question, because I'm on the board of ITI, and I've found in our board meetings, having both translators there to do the nitpicking and interpreters there to get people to keep going is quite a nice balance. As a board member of ITI, I have to ask, having an entire association full of interpreters, on the one hand, it sounds like a dream. On the other hand, it sounds like a bun fight waiting to happen. How do you manage the stereotypical interpreter behaviors, like wanting to talk all the time? How do you manage to have balance in an association that's just got interpreters in it?
Well, trust me, there's enough nitpickers in any association, so that's not.
Sorry, if I may, just for the other question, that because Karin just said a few very good examples about also things that are similar between our associations, because we're also concerned with the same issues, obviously, because they concern all conference and especially professional conference interpreters. And we also have been working with the German Office for Migration and Refugees. With one of our members is very, very committed to one of the projects that helps professionalize the lay interpreters that work for that office, and also other things that are really similar. So we have a lot that we can, and we have an exchange as well, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. So that's one good thing. As for Jonathan's question, I think you have a bit of everything in any association. You have a cross-section through society like anywhere else. So you get all kinds of things. And the thing is, I always feel that it's particularly lively because you have interpreters are generally, I guess, a little bit more, extroverted than normal average people. And it's very nice because it keeps things going. And every time we have like a meeting in person, actually, I really enjoy it because it's proper networking and it's proper like people being very active and having great ideas. And there's a lot of motivation there and enthusiasm. And I really enjoy that. It's really a pleasure working with interpreters.
They are an opinionated bunch. You're not wrong, and they do like. They have to like the sound of their own voices, otherwise they couldn't do their job. But I think it's a question of taking this out of the VKD level, not talking about the BDU anymore. Just basically working out who has the energy and the inclination to turn criticism into something constructive. We do deal quite often with people who love to complain, they love to criticize, but they're not really willing to do anything to change things. And basically, it's weeding out the people who have something to say, and that can be critical. I don't have a problem with that. But what I'd like to hear after they criticize is maybe a constructive suggestion on making things better. And it's identifying those kinds of people that is a bit of an art, let's say. And once you sort of show people that, yes, we're listening, and yes, we're expecting good ideas from you, why don't you help us change whatever you have to complain about? You do come up with quite good results. So it's a question, as I said, of encouraging people to open their mouths and say what they don't think is quite right, but at the same time encouraging them to help us do something about it. And I think we've been pretty good at doing that because we have a lot of working groups that are working on individual issues, because we're also very great at delegating things, because the board can't do everything.
Survival skill.
So you have to delegate, and then, of course, what our job is as the board is to just hold the reins and make sure people don't go off the rails or overstep the mark or things like that. But I mean, generally, if you've got an eye on what people are doing and if you're encouraging and supportive, I think it can work really well.
I was going to say, I bet your approval of the minutes of the previous meeting just flies by with no translators there. It's straight through. Because I've noticed that interpreters look at the minutes of a meeting and go, yep. Translators look at the same minutes and go, well, on line 3, there's a comma splice. And really, not that I'm stereotyping at all.
No, you're
not at all.
But Sarah, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just to what Karin said as well. I find what helps there is as well to break it down to a regional level, or in AIIC, of course, it's called sub-regional level because the regions are the countries. But so we're trying to start to revive the sub-regional activities a little bit, because we find that every time that people meet in smaller groups, it's much more efficient and people are more. They feel more addressed personally, and they feel that they can contribute something and they can make a difference. And it really helps to have like smaller units, so to speak. And we find that then if a region, once you get them to the table, I think that is the important and sometimes difficult step to motivate them to come there in the first place. But once that's happened, I think there's a dynamic that is quite nice actually, and quite constructive.
I have a question that I wanted to not only to direct to Sarah and Karin, but potentially also to Alex, or maybe you can actually start with this, because I mentioned in the beginning that there are many interpreters who are members in both associations, which maybe at first glance doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So yeah, maybe directly to you, Alex, the question is, what's the point? Why be in two associations that cater to interpreters? If that's a question you can answer. More or less straightforward, yeah.
No, I think it's a very valid question, because of course it costs money. So you're wondering, why would I spend twice the money on kind of the same service that I would be getting? But I think there's definitely an overlap between VKD and AIIC in Germany, but I don't think they offer identical things necessarily. I feel like, particularly because interpreting isn't a protected occupation, and we don't necessarily have a trade union. I just feel like the more we can do and the more that we can kind of represent our profession as a whole, the better it is. And so if I can actually support two organizations fighting for making my professional life better, then that's obviously great. So why wouldn't I do that? So I think that's definitely just like on a very basic level why you should be supporting both associations. I think the second step, and that really goes into the German model of VKD and then the global model of AIIC, is that, of course, AIIC has a much wider reach. It's the largest interpreting association in the world. So I think, as Karin was saying, and as Sarah was saying, of course, it just has a lot of clout around the globe. So I think that, of course, helps, and you want to be part of that. You want to be in the loop. You want to know what's going on around the globe with all the framework agreements, with international organizations. So that's kind of where you tap all the knowledge and resources within AIIC. And of course, also, AIIC members are around the globe. So if you're organizing an international event in, I don't know, South Africa, for example, you can find qualified AIIC members, and it's much easier to kind of get into touch with them without any sort of hesitation if they know that you're part of the association, because you're less likely to be like fishy or shady in any sort of way, hopefully.
Potentially trustworthy.
Potentially trustworthy, exactly.
That's really. I love how you're selling AIIC to me, Alex. That, AIIC members are hopefully less likely to be fishy. That is incredibly. I mean, I knew Germans were into precision, but that is the most precise description of the qualities that you look for in an AIIC member.
I feel like that was quite awesome. I feel like that applies to every and any association around the globe, though. So this is not anything AIIC specific. But then also VKD, I feel. I used to feel like VKD was much more active in Germany because it had the different regional groups, specific sub-regional groups like AIIC now has as well in the sub-regional sphere. But yeah, they were doing like all these different regional meetings in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, and it had like 5, now 6 different regional groups where they were also doing regular meetings, they were doing Christmas parties, they were doing workshops that were organized. So it was a very, very lively exchange, and it was kind of easy to tap into the I don't know, what do you call it, the spirit of the organization, if you will, just because there's always something there for you. But I do feel, however, like Sarah, you were saying, there's these sub-regional groups in AIIC, and you're trying to like get more people involved in that, and I can really see that AIIC is, I feel now, much more on the radar of people again, because it is much more active again, and everybody's kind of putting their energy into it and like putting on more, just more activity. I heard you now even have a Twitter account, so that's awesome.
Yes, we do. Just launched last week. So Yes. Getting more and more into, I don't know, the world 2.0, maybe not 1.0 or 4.0, but it's
baby steps.
Yes, exactly, because we're coming from a history, and I don't know, we have to build up things slowly. And we're also, must not forget that we have 330 members in Germany, so we're smaller than VKD is. So that's also something where... Yeah,
but of course, there's also a lot of members in both associations that are in both associations. So, VKD might have 660 members, but I don't know, maybe half of them are in AIIC. I'm just guessing. I'm just probably way off base, but I feel like there's a big overlap, and I feel like now both associations are actually using kind of those synergies that can be created from having all these members either work together in the booth, it might be like an AIIC member and a VKD member in the booth, or both of them are in both associations. And I've actually had in the past, literally years ago, I've had some negative experiences about being part of one association and then encountering a person of another association, and they were saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be in that. I don't want to work with you if you're in that association." But now I feel like it's much more amicable, and there have been like the market research that we were doing as kind of a collaborative effort of both associations. So I feel like that kind of strengthens not only the associations but also kind of the feeling of togetherness in the association. Stronger together, to paraphrase Hillary Clinton.
Thanks, Alex. It's really great to hear that as well, to have some feedback from a member, because we also had that, I think last year when we had our regional meeting, and we had a meeting of young interpreters as well. They gave us quite a bit of feedback, saying we were quite surprised how welcomed we were and how warm-hearted everyone was. I mean, it's sounds like we had a really bad reputation in the past or something for being like this ivory tower kind of thing. And I think this is really, really changing a lot and has changed a lot. Members are much more accessible, and when there are networking events, you feel more at home, and it's like a family to be.
Yeah, I can definitely confirm that, and also what Alex said. I mean, I've been a member in AIIC for 11 years, and I can remember how absolutely terrified I was even to open my mouth. I mean, it was that kind of place. Obviously, I was green at the time, which probably played a role as well. But I've seen it develop into a much friendlier place, and it's become younger as well. I would hesitate to sort of necessarily conclude that there's a correlation there, but yeah, you know what I mean, though. I mean, it's
yes.
People who've trained, let's say, over the last 10 to 15 or 20 years, they've come to know the market as it is today, and I think it is a very different place with very little privilege extended now to members, and I don't think that there's anything to be gained from being arrogant about our profession, or we're no longer special anymore. We really have to fight for recognition. We have to do a super good job because there literally are too many of us, let's face it. And I think people have understood that there's strength in numbers, and that we are stronger together, to use that horrible cliche, but there it is. And as for the relationship to VKD, certainly in Germany, there is much, much less tension, if there's even any anymore, of the kind of tension that there used to be, where if you were a VKD member, people wouldn't even look at you if you were trying to gain admission to AIIC. And by the same token, if a long-standing AIIC member was even contemplating joining VKD, they probably would think, now this is going to take a chip off my shoulder, kind of thing. So it's no longer like that at all, and I think it's high time that we kind of moved forward together. And I think this joint project that we've had with AIIC on the market study and the interpreter study, that's really helped as well, just to demonstrate that really we're all facing the same kinds of problems, and there is absolutely no point in trying to improve matters without looking to the left, to the right, behind us, in front of us. What are the people doing? It's just been a really good collaborative effort, and I think that has definitely helped.
And was that a one-off thing, the this cooperation in the market research that you did, or is there a move now towards a more structured cooperation, or maybe the fact that so many people are members in both associations, has that helped the getting closer together and doing more projects together as well, maybe?
Possibly. I'm kind of hearing half question there, are we going to do this again? I don't know. It's been a massive amount of work. Alex and I were both actively involved in the beginning, and then we kind of phased ourselves out of it because we had work to do for the board. But I think the idea is, once we have a reasonable idea of the state of the market in Germany, that we might want to repeat the whole exercise in 5 years' time, just to see, have things changed? Is there any shift in the amount of work that's going to a particular language combination? What about the modes? Is remote taking over? Is it becoming more popular? We'll stop you right there, Jonathan. I know you want to rant, and we will rant. I hope we will rant. That's just one of the things that we've picked up on for the first time, and I'm sure there will be things to be said about that in 5 years' time. So there is potential for a repeat of that maybe in 5 or 6 years' time. As for further collaboration, I don't think there's anything on the cards right now. Although, again, remote. I know that in AIIC there's a group working on the technical aspects of remote, whereas VKD has decided to look a bit more at what the arrival of remote means for the more commercial aspects of the job. Will it mean that we have to agree to working alone? Will it mean that we have to work for hours by ourselves? Will we have to coordinate with colleagues who are maybe potentially hundreds of miles away? Will we be forced to bill by the hour instead of by the day, for instance? So all of those kinds of things, that these are very new, and I think there's a lot to be gained by sharing that knowledge. So yeah, I do see some potential for collaboration in the future.
I mean, on the question of the AIIC atmosphere, it's not so much in Germany, but I was in Paris recently for the Prix Danica Seleskovich.
Oh yeah.
I was there representing the European Society for Translation Studies. And I was amazed at the warmth and the generosity of some of the more senior members of AIIC that I expected to be, I hate to say this, I expected them to be a little bit proud of themselves, and they're right to be proud of what they achieved. But the atmosphere in that room was very much kind of enjoying what the profession has already done. And then I think now there's a growing awareness, even amongst some of the father and mother figures of AIIC kind of interpreting itself, that the world now has changed so much. I even now slightly bristle at talk of the market, because certainly in the UK, it's very difficult to say what is and what isn't the market. I think the main growth market in the UK seems to be people who don't yet know that we exist. And so it's very difficult to measure the market in the UK, because, you could say this is the amount of jobs that happened this year. And then next year, half those clients might not have interpreting again anywhere, and you could have a whole bunch of new clients. And it doesn't seem as possible to kind of grab hold of a set number of clients and kind of shake money out of them until your career finishes. I don't know if it's different in Germany, but for us, the idea of a repeat client is still something that's relatively rare. We're tending to still have to fight for individual assignments. It's something that we'd like to see more of, but I'm really pleased to see AIIC and VKD doing a market study so that we understand what's there, what's happening. And then from there, it will be lovely to see, has everything changed in 5 years, or is it just the same with this little peak of remote somewhere? It's good to see.
I don't know. I don't want to put you too much on the spot, Sarah and Alex, maybe, but do you have an idea where that comes from? This whole, AIIC is the ivory tower. This whole, I don't even know if I would call it a reputation. Maybe it's always been sort of a myth, because usually what tends to happen is that it comes from, a handful of people where people have had negative experience, and then they tend to generalize. But I don't know, what was your personal impression or feeling, I guess, when you were thinking about becoming a member of AIIC or interacting with other AIIC members? Did you have that perception of, oh, well, it's AIIC members, it's, I don't know, but what was your feeling?
When I was a pre-candidate, I had the same experience that Alex described and that Jonathan just described, that I had a lot of respect for everyone. And I was a little bit, I was curious, but I also thought, okay, you have to, be careful about what you say or do, or whom you talk to, or something like that. That's what I felt before I joined, or before I went to the first meeting. And then when I was there, I thought, oh, everyone is actually really nice, and everyone is welcoming, and they don't treat me like, oh, you're the newbie, you don't know what's going on. But on the contrary, I mean, there's a line, there's like a glass ceiling, so to speak. You know that you have to, have some respect for those who are full members, and that it will take a while to get there. And rightly so, you have to work hard for membership, but it's never, like, you're not treated like someone completely below everyone else. You are treated as equal because you are also a professional and you're a conference interpreter. And I think, I'm not sure where this whole image comes from. Some people sometimes talk about the golden age of interpreters at the time when everyone had these really high flying jobs with traveling around with statespeople all the time, and everyone was always flying first class. And I don't know what, like, those things, those times that people talk about that obviously are no longer there, but where some of the attitude maybe might still prevail. But to be honest, I think I have the same impression as you, Alex, that I think if at all, these are just, individual attitudes that sometimes seep through, or sometimes you get a glimpse of them. But that's okay, because everyone is different, and people have their own history and their history in the profession, and but I think the general atmosphere is very, open-minded and welcoming. So that's the main thing for me, because I'm a networker and I like dealing with people. And I mean, most interpreters are, because after all, we need each other. We need lovely colleagues to work with. Without them, we would be nothing. So networking is everything. And as long as you have that on site when you're there, and you have this feeling, oh, there are people that I can connect with. Of course, it's always the same. Like, you don't connect with everyone the same, but I mean, there are always people that you can connect with, and that have the same ideas about how a professional interpreters should work and what they should do and should not do in the booth, and how they prepare and things like that. And yes, it's lovely to be in a community like that.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. I think and I also agree with what you were saying, Alex, because it's kind of that myth that kind of like seeps into the general fabric of the conversation. Because I remember when I was in the UK at university, it was the first time that I ever heard about AIIC, and they were telling us, oh, you should definitely join, but beware, it can be very difficult and it's a very tough situation to get yourself into. And then as you get the first jobs, you start talking to your colleagues, and it's kind of like in the news, like in the news, you never hear, oh, today was a lovely day in Palestine. Nobody died. Nothing ever happened. No, everybody just always talks about the really bad things. And you only ever, at these conference dinners with colleagues, you only ever hear, oh, there was this one AIIC colleague, and it was a really, really tough nut to crack. And it was very, very bad to work with them. And it was a real diva moment. And I was like, oh my God, they must all be like that. They must just all be like that. That's what I keep hearing over and over again. And then when I was preparing to come back over to Munich, the first thing that I heard, and I knew that Munich was very like a very AIIC dominated market in a way, and I heard, watch out, Alex, Munich is a shark tank. It's a shark tank. And I was like, oh my God, Jesus Christ, what am I going to get myself into? And then I come over here and I start working with these colleagues for the first couple of times, and I'm like, you know what, actually they're all super nice. And yeah, like Sarah, you were saying, you're not going to get along with everyone. I mean, there are some people that I would rather steer clear of, but there's also some colleagues in the VKD that are totally nuts. So,
Amen.
You find these people everywhere. So I think it's really just kind of like that myth that won't die down, that AIIC is like this really standoffish, horrible association that is super mean to everyone, because that's no longer the case, I feel. If it ever was,
yeah,
I don't know.
There's always the whole grain of truth thing to this, I guess. But
So I now want to know what reputation VKD had, because I jokingly used to nickname AIIC the Freemasonry of interpreting, because that was the impression that you. It's the impression that you get from the outside is that you need to know people who are already there, and then you have this initiation ceremony where you need to roll up one trouser leg and swear allegiance to.
And the secret handshake and all.
Well,
no, VKD is not like that at all. But it does have a different history, because it kind of grew out of what used to be, I guess, a subgroup of BDU, of conference interpreters, who were called die Berufsgruppekonferenz, which was just like a little, I guess, just a small group of people who were conference interpreters rather than just interpreters in inverted commas. And they became, I guess, more numerous as time went on, and decided that they needed their own structures and their own issues. And that is how VKD was born. VKD, as such, has been around under that name for 15 years. And I don't think it has that reputation, because it's not a closed shop. And I think the paths of access to VKD are quite different from AIIC. I can remember that it was really quite tough to get those days, those hundreds of days in the beginning, especially because when you're starting out in the profession, you don't know the right people. You might not have the maybe 100 days a year that you need to get in quickly, that kind of thing. And for VKD, there's simply a different path of access into the association, and that makes it a lot easier for people to get in. So that in itself, I think, gives it a whole other atmosphere, at least to outsiders. It's not seen as a closed shop. But as always, make no mistake, it gives people a terms of reference within which they're supposed to work, and it's not a free for all. You can't do what you want. You have to abide by the rules, just like with AIIC. So as long as you do a good job and more or less toe the line, you're going to be absolutely fine. So yeah, in that sense, I think that the two associations are not that dissimilar.
Mm. Yeah, that leads me to a topic that is very dear to my heart, which is when I talk to interpreting students, I always, recommend is probably not the right word. I urge them to join a professional association as soon as they can, because of the many benefits that we've, to some degree already touched upon now, the networking, getting to know the right people, and learning about how the market works and how they can properly integrate the market, and so on and so forth. So I'm interested in how your two associations sort of approach students or potential interpreters, cooperation with schools, for example, or the rules that you have in place, or maybe not rules, but the systems you have in place to make it a little bit easier for people to join up? Because I think, as you already mentioned, Karin, it's quite different how you enter the association. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and maybe we can start with Sarah.
Sure, yeah. So we have, just as VKD has as well, we have a department, so to speak, for young interpreters. So we have a person in charge of young interpreters, the Nachwuchsreferentin, who takes care of that. That's Andrea Borges at the moment. And she basically goes to yes, she is. She's lovely. She's very communicative and very open. And I think she has a good relation to the young interpreters that want to join AIIC. So basically what you do when you're a young interpreter and you don't have the work experience yet that you need to join AIIC, which is, I think at the moment, is 150 conference days, is that you become a so-called pre-candidate. So you're not a candidate for membership, but you're a pre-candidate for candidacy for membership. It's a bit complicated, but this whole thing is... So basically, you can collect those days that you need during that time. And this time period has just been extended in January at the General Assembly in Valencia, has been extended to a default 5 years instead of 3 years. So it gives people more time. It is more realistic, because we've been finding that people have more difficulty getting those days in a short number of years. So this is one thing that we do to make it easier for young interpreters to have access to again, to become a member in the end. Also, basically, Andrea, our person in charge of young interpreters, she reaches out to universities. She's in touch with universities. She goes to universities and presents the association. She answers questions. She's always open for anybody to approach her to ask questions about AIIC and how you join and what they can do. Also at AIIC, we have a young interpreters program, a mentoring program, where young interpreters can be paired with a more experienced interpreter, and they will kind of guide them or answer any questions they might have. That's not very well known, but it exists. And also for a few years, we've had this Young Interpreters Prize that we grant every year. So every year, the universities in Germany can recommend a student who stands out, and they write an essay basically, and a committee selects the person that we believe is the most deserving of that prize, and that prize is then associated with certain advantages and also being introduced to certain organizations in Germany where you could potentially work and things like that. So yes, so we have quite a few things in place for young interpreters, and they're always welcome.
I think also a good thing that not a lot of people might have on their radar is that every time there's a regional meeting for AIIC, which is usually on the Saturday and the Sunday, the Friday before that, there's a big meeting where literally anyone can join. So even if you're not a member of the association, even if you're still at university or if you just graduated, you can go there and you can actually mix and mingle with all these established AIIC members, pre-candidates. And it's a really good way of getting in touch and kind of jumping over that mental hurdle that you might have of kind of sort of getting in touch with the association, and you see that they won't bite.
Exactly, that's one thing that we do before the Regionalversammlung, the regional meeting, and also Andrea is trying to put it in place twice a year, even also
that's great.
That would be nice to be able to do that as well. And also there's been Almute Löber, one of our very committed members, and who was also used to be in charge of young interpreters at AIIC. She developed this workshop, or this CPD measure. It's called Interpreters for Interpreters, and that is also something that is free for all to join, to basically come for a day and listen to what colleagues have to say about certain things. And it's a very great platform for an exchange as well. And this is normally now also before the weekend of the regional assembly. So there are quite a few things going on, and so you can just contact Andrea Borges, the Nachwuchsreferentin, on our website to find out.
It's a good package deal.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and I guess VKD has the Nachwuchsprogramm, the Young Interpreters Program as well, which is legendary, somebody recently said to me, and the BDU, the other sort of regional groups inside the BDU, they're really interested in hearing more about it because they're finding it quite difficult to find mentors. So they've contacted us because they think it's a really good thing. So that's been around for 10 years, and that started out quite small, but meanwhile, I think every year they have 20 tandems, so 20 mentors and 20 mentees. And I don't know of any young interpreter who's tried to sign up to the scheme and hasn't found a mentor. So, and very often mentors actually take 2 or 3 mentees if they are able to do so, and if the language combination fits, and if they're in the right place, if they're in the right location. And I actually think that is super important because it's something that's available to complete new joinees of VKD. It doesn't matter how experienced they are. And it goes some way, I think, to preventing them from just sloping off into the grey market, which I think is a particular danger when you've just come out of university. You don't really know what you're doing. The agencies have basically jumped on you because you might have a website already, and they'll contact you to say, oh, we know that you need to get your days together. Why don't you do this job? It's only 5 hours. You can work alone. It's not a problem. And here's 300 euros for the privilege, kind of thing. So if that's the kind of thing that people get confronted with when they're quite young, and they don't quite know what to think of it, and if they have somebody to call, somebody they trust, and say, look, I've been offered this thing, I really don't know what to do with it, how can I respond? I don't really want to do it, but I do need to make rent this month, that kind of thing. Then the mentor can give them some guidance on whether or not they should do it, and why not, and if not, why not, which is equally important, just to explain to people that this is not a good thing for you long term. Don't do it. Because I think it also signals to young interpreters that we are part of a community, again, at the risk of sounding cliched. People do look at what everyone else is doing. It's not a vacuum that you operate in. Gossip travels fast, I think, in the interpreting community. And if you make some bad choices and you ruin your reputation, that's not a good thing. And I would hate to hear of good young interpreters who get lost that way, get lost along the way. So I think it's a great way to sort of welcome them into the profession and just show them the ropes and demonstrate to them what's good and what's not, and how to develop a gut feeling for the kinds of working conditions that are okay. Some are borderline, some are completely unacceptable. But I mean, who's going to tell you that when you're fresh out of uni? Nobody really. So yeah, I love the fact that both associations have an active program, because I think it's very necessary.
Yeah, and I think it's not only for young interpreters, because it's also it's an ongoing process that you talk to your peers and you find out what do they do, what do they feel is acceptable, what's not, and sometimes you learn from each other. You look to each other and you have maybe role models that you can say, okay, she did that in that quote, and she won the contract, and then you can say, next time I will increase my price for by about, I don't know, something. And for example, I had a colleague where we talked about a potential job, and then I said to her basically, look, what I do normally, if I can't avoid working with Bidul, like with this whispered interpreting equipment, which I tend to avoid, of course, if it's possible, but in some situations it is not. And then I said to her, look, what I do then is charge a consecutive fee, because it's in difficult working conditions. And she didn't even think of that before. But then she said, okay, I'll do this. And she did it with her client, and it was fine. So like those kind of things, these little things where you can learn from each other and inspire each other maybe. And you can see also what's possible, because sometimes you look to the more senior colleagues and they've had clients for years that they've been working for really good conditions, really good fees. And you see as a young interpreter, or even as a somewhat more junior interpreter, that this is possible. It's not a myth. You can do it. And then if you're in the position of maybe even working also as a translator or something else, and if you can afford to turn down jobs that do not meet your really high standards, then do, because that will just get you in the right place in the end. So we can always learn from each other. That's one of the big advantages of associations too, where we always have an exchange and we can always look what's left and right, and be inspired.
And I think as well that feeds into the market changes that we've seen, that certainly in the UK, there's a wider range of working conditions than there were even when I started out. I don't know if it's the same in Germany, but there's literally everything in the UK from, what's wrong with doing an entire day of whispered interpreting on your own, all the way through to kind of brilliant conditions with fantastic booths and amazing sound engineers. And there's literally everything in between. And it's great to hear that AIIC and VKD have these programs to sit with the young interpreters and go, well, okay, sometimes the lines are fuzzy, but there are still lines as to what is and isn't okay. A quick one for me is whispered interpreting on your own for extended period of times, you're not going to deliver quality, so why do it? But people fresh out of university might not be aware of the tricks that people would try to play on them to get them to take substandard work. I mean, I had an agency say to me that there would be another interpreter there, and I turned up and no one was there. And I had to do a full day of whispered interpreting on my own, with the agency having promised me that there'd be someone else there. And you think, actually, you need to understand, you need to see things, you need to learn to ask quite sharp questions sometimes, just to make sure everything's going to be okay. And it's great to hear young interpreters getting that advice that they really need at the start of their career.
Yeah, one thing I would definitely like to cover is training and CPD, because that's a topic that we've covered several times in various episodes, because we find it so important. And I think both associations or regions, if you will, are doing very interesting stuff. For example, Sarah, you mentioned Almuti's projects, the interpreter for interpreter training, so we can talk about this a little bit. And I know that the VKD, on the other hand, it seems to me, as an outsider now, seems to be very strategic, I think, or very methodical, if that's a word, because I think you have a summer school and lots of activities that relate to what is called professionalization, especially for young or starting out interpreters. And there's lots of training, I think, as well related to the young interpreter scheme. So maybe we can cover that a little bit, what your approach to training is, and maybe start with Karin.
I'm not entirely up on exactly what's on offer at the moment, because VKD is privileged to be able to work with BDU, and BDU, in fact, has a separate training organization that's been founded to essentially manage all the commercial aspects of CPD, also for the translators, but equally for interpreters and conference interpreters. And they basically run whatever back end you need with invoicing, billing, and signing up and so on. So I'm not entirely sure what is on the market at the moment. What I can say is that there are both language-related courses on offer, professionalizing your B, for instance, really polishing it up, or trying to turn your C into a B, which a lot of people are doing right now. Things that are particularly relevant for newcomers to the profession, for instance, taxation issues, how to manage your own books, insurance for interpreters, what makes sense, what is completely exaggerated.
You know what's coming up as well? A really super interesting webinar on the GDPR.
Oh my God, I knew you were
I'm
going to
sorry,
say that.
I had to bring it up.
GDPR klaxon.
I have been working on GDPR all day. I've got GDPR coming out of my bloody ear. So yeah, there is training on that kind of stuff. Let's not go there. Let's not name it by its name.
This is getting more than we do.
And that is very, very helpful, I have to say. Just to know that if you need to build up more knowledge on a certain topic, then invariably over the course of a year or two, there will be something for you. I should maybe also mention that there's been some noises made about making CPD mandatory, a certain amount of it. In Italy, certainly, the Italian Association has introduced that, which I believe has been made a condition of membership now. So if you don't do it, you get kicked out, basically. We've kind of explored whether this is something that our members would like. The concept that we put on the table a couple of years ago wasn't quite thought through to the very end, but that was fine because we just wanted to test the waters and see how people would respond. I think people were more or less in favor. Had the concept been a little more detailed and a bit more thought through, we might have even had it approved by the membership. But again, it's evolving. It's something that people have been thinking about recently, whether it makes sense to force people into CPD. My personal take on it is that it makes sense to be reminded of the fact that it is important. And we all know what it's like. Life takes over. We all have really busy working lives. We have family. We go on holiday, and suddenly you've kind of run out of time to do anything like that, and it's already November or something. So then you think, oh, I'll do it next year. That's fine. Except then, January comes around and work starts, and
before you know it, it's November again.
Before you know it, it's November. And I think CPD is great because it reminds you that you definitely always have something new to learn and that you're never really finished with it. I'm not going to go into the whole EU blah with lifelong learning and stuff like that, but I think it does make sense because when freelancers, nobody forces us to do anything. And so it's very easy to just be quite complacent and think, I'm fine, I'm operating within my own little bubble. I'm a reasonable enough interpreter, there's nothing more I can learn. I think that's really quite dangerous. So I would like to see some kind of mechanism that would remind people at regular intervals that they really should maybe think about refreshing their knowledge of whatever subject. Yeah, we're working on it.
Well, and the whole comfort zone thing, I think, not only applies to training, it also applies to going out and socializing and that kind of. But yeah, that's just a side note. I found that a good remark.
I was going to say, for anyone wanting to refresh their CPD on the mental, physical, and quality effects of remote simultaneous interpreting, I have just finished a 3,000 word report.
Shameless plug.
Well, it's actually an ITI plug because ITI have launched a research network, and by the end of the summer, the first ebook from the ITI research network will be out, and there will be a 3,000 word paper on basically is remote simultaneous interpreting good for you. I'm not going to give away the answer.
I look very much forward to reading that.
I had to look up 18 years worth of research because I've been looking at it since the year 2000, started by the European Commission, and I had to skim through 18 years worth of research and say what are the trends. There are trends. I'm not going to say them on this show because Barry Olsen would probably hunt me down.
Fair enough. Though, I just want to mention two things, and it kind of also goes into the question that you asked earlier, Alex, about whether VKD and AIIC are collaborating, will collaborate in the future. I think just a few months ago, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, the BDU actually officially announced that AIIC and BDU are now officially collaborating in that AIIC members are now getting members rates for CPD events and webinars. So I think that's a really good step. And again, it just shows that, we're all in the same boat. We're all kind of looking for the same training opportunities. So I think that just kind of, again, goes hand in hand with that. And the second thing that I want to mention is that this is more of a general statement on CPD, is that you don't always need to rely on the associations to kind of feed you all the information that you're looking for. We just did it in Munich last year. Just a couple of colleagues and I were sitting, we all had a job together, and then we were saying, it would be really interesting if we could actually see kind of more in-depth of what this conference is actually about. It was kind of like a purchasing department of an automotive company, and we were saying, it would be really cool if business-wise we would actually know kind of their thought process. And then some of us went out looking for different websites of coaches. They actually coach suppliers of the automotive industry on negotiations with the purchasing departments. And then we just kind of arranged our own little CPD group. And it was 6 of us in the beginning, and then actually only 3 of us ended up going to the event because of jobs and stuff. But we basically just arrange our own little CPD group. So that can happen too. And you don't always need to rely on the association for everything. I mean, it's great what they provide. It's amazing, but be the change. Do the thing you want to see.
Oh, he went there. He went there.
I'm just waiting for Alex to start singing now. But I mean, this sounds like a lot of conversations that we've been having in ITI, actually, is that our number one CPD issue that members come to us with is, they're a specialized high-end translator or interpreter, and they say, where's the CPD for me? And our usual answer is, well, our CPD has to at least cover its cost and probably be profitable. So there are certain kinds of CPD that you just can't provide. So, if someone's super specialized, so I know an interpreter who specializes in neurology conferences, no association could do neurology CPD to the level that he needs. But by the same token, we could be encouraging people saying, well, if you need training in neurosurgery on white rats, go and do it and write a report for us on what it was like to encourage other people to do the same. I love Alex's idea of, if you feel that you want CPD in this area, go do it. And the more resources we have, the better.
That's actually really quite true. And I think if you are a recognized expert in a certain area and you feel quite alone in your field and you would like some more support and whatnot, then why don't you become a kind of trainer yourself? Why don't you share your knowledge? That we know how we deal with knowledge, we know how we digest it, we know how we research it, we know how we acquire it. So why don't you share that with your colleagues? I agree, looking to an association for that kind of level of detail is probably not going to lead you anywhere. But what I was going to say in response to Alex, people kind of do a conference and they feel that they've prepared really, really well, but they haven't really gotten right down to the detail. They haven't really 100% understood what this is about, although they were doing a good job. Why don't you maybe approach the client and say, look, this has been such an interesting conference. Would you be happy if a group of us came to visit you at your premises one day? Could you maybe share your knowledge with us? In fact, I know of colleagues who've done that. They went to see, I think it was the production site of a wind turbine manufacturer in the north of Germany. And I know for a fact, because it's actually a client of mine, that they were so chuffed that the interpreters had shown an interest in their subject that they were more than happy to clear their diaries and welcome them in, because it's wonderful if somebody shares your passion like that, and B, what better activity could there be to show that client that you value them? I mean, whenever they need interpreters next, you're the one they're going to call, because they know that you have a genuine interest and that you're willing to sort of, deepen your knowledge on something. So yeah, I think showing initiative, I think, is what we need there. And also, given that the market is becoming difficult in that it's becoming a commodity, the less visibility you have and the more exchangeable the service, I think the higher the risk that, next time around the client is just going to choose somebody else. But I do believe quite firmly that if you can make a positive impression on the client in that, not sort of pandering to them or anything, just being quite genuine. I mean, I do plenty of jobs that I really I don't mind seeing the back of, but every now and again, something does come along where you think, oh, that's actually really cool. I'd love to do that again. And maybe, surprise, surprise, it's a repeat thing that they do every year. That is when it's really worth getting right into it and showing the client that you care, and that your output is going to be all the more better if you understand what's going on, and if you have a real passion for it. Sylvia Kalina once actually said something that I thought was everyone knows her, I guess. If they trained in Germany, certainly
everyone should.
She used to say that it doesn't really matter how boring the subject is that you're working on. At that very moment, you need to develop a passion for that thing, and you need to not just pretend, well, obviously pretend to some extent, but you need to sound like you're really into it. And that is what makes a good interpretation much, much better. And I think she was quite right on that. And I once heard her say that in class, and the students were basically just rolling their eyes at each other. But I knew exactly what she meant.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing on earth, I think, for everyone, including oneself, is a job where you're not really having a lot of fun.
Yeah. I was going to say, sometimes the jobs on the surface, you go, this is going to be a tricky job, I don't know how I'm going to get through it. Those jobs where you have to work hard to make it work are sometimes the ones where at the end of the day you go, I'm glad I did that.
Quite.
Yeah, and what I was going to say was that, I mean, we didn't really talk about remote interpreting or, interpreting apps or anything like that, which is probably for the better. But I think what you just...
Don't get me started.
Yeah, no, I'm not. What you just said there, Karin, I think perfectly encapsulates, I think, what still makes the difference, literally, between a man and the machine is that, the passion and caring for the topic and so on and so forth. So in that respect, I think that was a great way to sort of slowly move towards the end. But I have one final thing, which I think we warned you of, because what we would like from you, Karin and Sarah, is a little bit of an elevator pitch, we called it. So let's just assume this typical situation. You talk to an interpreting student, for example. You've given a presentation of your association, or you've just talked about your job, and somebody approaches you, potential interpreter or maybe budding interpreter. Why should I join an association, or why should I join your association? What would you tell them?
Why join AIIC? Well, there are several reasons for joining, of course. First of all, clients love AIIC. Because AIIC as a brand is seen as a quality seal, as the recent market study confirms as well. AIIC stands for excellence and premium quality. And also, I've heard that more and more organizations are asking to work only with interpreters who are members of a professional association. The second reason is the lovely and reliable colleagues that you will have, because as I said, global networking, you will have access to really, really great booth mates. And then also for you as a professional, of course, for knowing your worth, it's worth striving for the entrance ticket, because once in, members can be part of a world-class network after all. So come and join the AIIC family. That's all I have to say.
Okay, well, if I remember right, the question is, why should you join an association now? I don't necessarily want to pitch VKD, because I think the reasons for joining are pretty much the same as for AIIC, and also we're doing this in English, so I'm not entirely sure whether this is going out to a German audience. But that having been said, I think that there is strength in numbers, and the younger ones might not realize it yet, but I'm sure the people who've been around and been to the rodeo a few times will know this. It is getting more difficult, and I think it's good to have the backing of a community of interpreters that might not be as homogeneous as you think, but certainly that operate within the same, I think I've used the term before, the terms of reference, and working to the same kinds of standards, operating according to the same kinds of values, people who you can just, call if you need some advice, a book, a directory that you can open, and find people that you need if you don't know anyone in your own direct little bubble that you're in. And essentially, I think, we're in this more or less for life. I know that it's not really the common thing to do anymore, to stay in one profession for a very, very long time, maybe even a lifetime. But, as interpreters, I think that is what we have chosen to do, unless, our hearing goes or something, or we decide to do something completely different. What? We're in it for the long run, and why not actively help to shape the profession and shape the market? We're not passive recipients of what goes on. I think we have a lot that we can do to provide input to how things go. We can take responsibility for what we do. We're not passive. I think it's really important to sort of recognize that you can actively shape what is going on in this profession. And essentially, you are the association. We are the association. You can't just look to the board and say, do this, do that. Just remember that your actions leave a mark, and good or bad. And I don't know, make it interesting. You're in this for like 40 years. You might as well shape it the way you want it to be.
Make it worth the while.
Make it worthwhile, exactly. And you can't do that by yourself.
No.
And I think it's really important to club together with more or less like-minded colleagues. And that would be, I think, my very tall skyscraper elevator.
Yeah.
Well, love is the way,
Love is the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe you get stuck in the elevator. Who knows?
You might get stuck.
No one told me we were here for 40 years. That is slightly scary.
Surprise!
There are certain jobs that if the client said you're doing this for the next 40 years, I would go, oh, please no. Certain jobs, does anyone else have a job they would love to go and relive because it was so much fun?
Oh, yeah. I can think of a couple.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
That has happened. It doesn't happen very often, it has to be said, but yeah.
You're like, do you want me to do an extra couple of hours? Oh, sorry, terms and conditions.
No, not like that.
Okay, great.
If somebody said, would you like to come back next year? I'm like, yeah,
Sure. Well, you are certainly welcome to come back in a year, Sarah, or even earlier.
We
if
can
you'd
talk
like to.
about remote. Can I come back and have a remote bonfire?
Yes, we can have a 90-minute
Yes.
rant just between you, Karen, and Jonathan.
We'll just rant. Oh, that's great.
I think Karen and I are going to make friends on this topic.
Yeah.
We're going to be friends.
It's kind of ugly, actually, what we know about remote interpreting in general. It should kind of have a health warning like cigarettes and alcohol.
I agree for what it's worth, but that's another story for another day.
Let me just quickly record the outro, and then you guys can keep talking. Okay. Yeah, because I really wanted to thank both Karin Walker and Sarah King for joining us on the show. It was the second episode on the same topic, but I hope it wasn't boring. At least I think the three of us found it very, very interesting, especially since this was a little bit more interpreter focused, whereas in the first episode, we were talking with representatives of associations that cater to both translators and interpreters. So it was certainly interesting to have this slightly different perspective this time around. So thank you for sharing your not only your knowledge and your insight, but also your passion, I think, for being in an association, for running an association, and for making sure that people, join associations and contribute to associations as well and make it interesting, as one of you said. So thank you very much for that. That's it for today. Thank you for joining us. If you're still not a member in an association, we still love you. I mean, shame on you, but we still love you. But please go do some research, just check which associations are available in your area and in your field of expertise. And don't forget, it's usually tax deductible.
It's always tax deductible.
It's always tax deductible, exactly. And if you're a staff interpreter, you should still join
There's a line
it. You
from
should still
a
join
Monty
association.
Python song that just came into my head, but I can't pull it.
Oh, please.
But yeah, it is
please.
tax deductible.
Absolutely.
Please let's go down Monty Python. That would be even funnier.
Before we get into Monty Python, I wanted to say that if you, dear listeners, if you want to join the conversation, please feel free to do so. You can leave a comment below this episode on our website, troubleterps.com. And you can, of course, talk to us on social media. We're at Troubleterps on Twitter and facebook.com/Troubleterps. If you're still on Facebook, that's all right too. And please don't forget, we have a live event coming up in November. Then is it the 19th of November, guys? I think it's the 19th of November. Anyway, all the information is on troubleterps.com/live. It's going to be in London in the middle of November. And tickets are going to go on sale very
Probably
soon.
by the time
So
you listen to
watch
this
space.
episode.
Hopefully, yes.
It's
So
the
that's it.
17th of November. 17th of November.
It's the 17th of November. There you go. It's the 17th of November, and we hope all of you are going to be there. That's going to be a lot of fun. So that's it for tonight. Bye-bye, and see you in the next
Thank you,
episode.
guys. Bye.
Bye. Bye night.
So that's the official goodbye.
That's the official goodbye, yes.
Oh, that's actually really cool. I'd love to do that again.
I'm sure our listeners will love it.
Always look on the good side of life. Da-dum, 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 da-dum.